Boxing fans, we're talking Andre Ward versus, Brand. Special guest in studio, Alan Swyer, and some news and notes. Stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, Afterbuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Andrea Fasano looks different today, my usual co-host. What's up, everyone? It's the Boxing After Show here at Afterbuzz TV. I'm Jared Gilkerson. That's at Gilkerson Radio on Twitter, and I'm joined by, I didn't know what to call, I was writer, director, producer.
Character.
Bad boy. Yes, bad boy of boxing. Alan Swyer here, and we'll promote this a little later in the show, but amazing documentary. We go to my hard cam here. El Boxeo. It's on DVD, Amazon Prime. Just watched it yesterday. We're going to be talking all about it today. And before we show you a little teaser on that, just wanted to let you know that we are live on YouTube right now, and there's a chat room. So if you have questions for us, send them our way. Let us know if you didn't score the fight 120 to 108 last night. I'd be surprised if you didn't. So chime in. Let us know what you
get
think.
A vision test.
yeah. Or get a license to judge.
Right. Well, there are some decent ophthalmologists in this country.
Yeah. Well, not if you ask some fight fans about judging. That's a whole other show we can do about judges. And we're also on iTunes. Rate us, subscribe. That helps keep me on the air so you can hear my annoying voice talk about boxing every week. SoundCloud. And we just love talking to the fans every week. I love interacting with boxing fans like we were talking, Alan.
Absolutely.
It's a niche, and we're a community who have to stick together. So,
boxing brotherhood.
Yes, we are a brotherhood. And if we find you, we will latch on and we'll become best friends with you. I think I am really good friends with everyone I've met who said they're a big boxing fan. I still talk to.
That's the litmus
regularly.
test.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, we're gonna jump in and review the fight from last night. But first, a little teaser to El Boxeo.
Julio Cesar Chavez helped usher in, I think, or solidify, I'm going to say, Hispanic boxers as marquee champions. He couldn't convince his own promoter, Don King, that he should be on top of cards for a long time.
That's a great point, and I'll just talk about. You've been in the game longer than I have.
I've been on this planet longer than you have.
That's true. As a kid, when I became a fan of boxing in the '90s, Chavez was such a huge name.
Oh yeah.
But honestly, didn't hear about him until later on when he was in the latter days of his career.
Right.
And it's such a shame that we've seen such a shift from boxing becoming such a Latin-driven sport.
Absolutely. Today, in the stands as well as in the ring, boxing is a Latino-driven sport. Yes, we have some wonderful Eastern European fighters who've come on the scene. What kind of fan base do they have? It's really interesting that Golovkin, who's a wonderful fighter, is being billed as fighting Mexican style. And what's his home base? He lives in Santa Monica. He's fought in Carson. They're trying desperately because boxing is tribal today. It is not, sadly, it's no longer a major sport. It's become a niche sport. We're hoping, you and I are going to help bring it back. We're hoping it'll take off again. But at this point, the audience is Latino. It's Mexican, Mexican-American, Puerto Rican. But even there, we're hitting some skid marks because Canelo is no longer the great Mexican hope. We need another one. Will it be Gilberto Ramirez? Puerto Rico was the source of amazing fighters. Yeah. Trinidad, Benitez, Vasquez Jr. and Sr. We had, Ivan Calderon. Great fighters coming out of there. Cotto is the last man standing. That needs to be regenerated too.
But sports are always looking for the next star.
Absolutely.
Tom Brady's leaving, Peyton Manning's leaving. Who's going to be the face of the sport? And I really don't think boxing has ever had trouble regenerating someone as a face. There might be a little lull, But then you always get someone. I mean,
But
Mayweather was
I'm
the
gonna,
face.
I'm going to
Pacquiao
point
was
something
the
out
face.
though that's really dramatic. How long has it been since we had a charismatic American heavyweight?
Well, that, if you ask me and a lot of other boxing fans, is the core reason.
Absolutely.
Why a lot of fight fans, casual fans, lost interest because of the boom of the heavyweights in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We got used to as fans, or casual fans got used to, that, hey, that's boxing. And that's why Chavez, guys like that, were on the
Absolutely.
undercard. So we got so used to it, or the casual fan did. And then as soon as those guys were gone, and I think we have 40 years of that.
Right, it became Latino-driven.
Yeah.
We had some wonderful exceptions. Floyd Mayweather was news. There's a term that I use. You know something is important when it's off in movies, when it's off the entertainment page, in sports, when it's off the sports page. So Floyd became front page news, and Floyd became a story unto himself. The downside of that is, my joke that I used with you before, which is that Floyd, to me, was the single most exciting fighter in the world until he stepped into the ring.
That's true.
He was a marvelously gifted boxer, but his fights were not fun. He was willing to stink up the room in order to win a fight if need be. But he had a larger-than-life personality, and he had a nickname.
Yep.
Or he had multiple nicknames as he changed over the course of his career.
Like Prince.
Absolutely. The artist known as.
Yes.
But getting back to the boxing world, the greatest rivalry post the heavyweights was a Puerto Rican against a Mexican.
Yep.
They knew you're going to have two contrasting styles. You were going to have people who were painting their faces and showing up with the flags. You were going to have you were going to get your money's worth.
Yeah.
You had two knowledgeable fan bases based upon chauvinism and a love of the sport and what I call tribalism. And the result was great boxing. But those two. We're not getting as many great fighters as before. You also had wonderful things when you had a Mexican versus a Mexican American, and you had some funny things come out of that. For instance, De La Hoya was the first Latino crossover star with a great narrative, gold medal that he won for his mother, the Golden Boy using the Art Aragon title. Great looking guy. Women were interested. Men didn't resent his looks.
No.
But Oscar, when he fought, even in his hometown, was dismayed when he could have fought Chavez 100 times, and his cousins and his neighbors would still be rooting for the true Mexican.
That's true. That's true. And I really want to dive into some of this. And
Great.
We'll talk about some fans that might have turned on someone last night in Oakland for Andre Ward. And, this is a recap kind of show. It is Afterbuzz. So I am obligated to talk about the fight, and it'll be brief.
Did you see a fight?
I think I
saw 12 rounds, but I didn't see a fight.
I saw one breakout maybe in like the 6th or 7th round for like 30 seconds. But so obviously we both scored the fight 120, 108. There's really not much to talk about in the fight itself. It's more the larger picture of Andre Ward.
Well, the questions are threefold actually. First of all, why did Ward pick that fight? Secondly, what does it say about his boxing power or lack thereof now that he's moved up in weight, never having been a real knockout artist?
No, I mean only 15 KOs in 30 fights.
Exactly.
Now, and all of those were probably middleweight.
Exactly.
So, and it never transferred over to Super 6.
Right.
He could, like Max Kellerman said, beat guys up.
Yeah.
Yes,
no,
he could beat them.
He's
to
an
a pulp.
accomplished fighter.
Yes.
But the other thing is, what does it portend for the upcoming fight with Kovalev? Can we play conspiracy theorist and say, he was, since Kovalev was there, he was deking him by not showing too much? I think, that...
How does that do any good? So, as a business... let's take this as a business end. You're HBO.
Yes.
If you watched the broadcast fans last night, you saw that Jim Lampley opened up the show saying that this isn't much of a fight. And you were saying that's a big statement. Jim's a straight shooter.
You know what that's tantamount to? That's tantamount to seeing an MGM movie where the lion, when he comes onto the screen, instead of roaring, shakes his head.
They should do that more often, I think. They should just judge that based on screenings. That would be a good idea. But I like that they do that because I don't see that in PBC.
No, Heyman is not going to allow that.
So I like that they give them a little bit of freedom, but they have to toe that company line and say the right things. But what does this do now? Because in my opinion, it's always about our sport is always about the casual fan, like every other sport. And what did you do last night? If you heard about this Kovalev-Ward fight, what did that fight do last night to get anybody more interested?
Well, let me give you an analogy, Jared.
Okay.
You walk out, you go with your girlfriend, your wife, your buddy to see a film, and you love it. The minute you walk out and you're headed to the car, you say, "What else is playing?"
Yeah.
You have a wonderful meal somewhere, and you say, "What other good restaurants should we hit in this town?" You see a great fight, and a great fight doesn't necessarily entail great fighters. And, I'll give you an example. The first and second fights between Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado, these are two good fighters, not great fighters, but nobody said, "I didn't get my money's worth."
No.
Everybody said, "When are they fighting again?"
Exactly.
They were, those were great fights. Last week.
But again, just not to interrupt, but you can sell those fights to pure boxing fans. Because the casual fan isn't going to put in the effort to find where these fighters are fighting. Even in the case of Salido and Vargas.
Yeah.
We don't know how good Vargas can be. I think he can be pretty good. Salido is just a warrior, 10 losses. Yeah. And if you see that as a casual fan, you're not going to, these guys. No, you're not going to search it out.
He's there for the Mexican, the true Mexican fight fan who respects this guy, who's going to give you his heart and everything in him every single outing.
So you can't fault the HBOs and Showtimes for putting undefeated guys, belt holders, on television.
We can if we want.
You can to a point. I mean, this fight.
Yeah,
Brand is undefeated somehow.
Here's the story. Boxing today depends. The business of boxing. On all sorts of boxing websites, you see guys coming up with the fights that ought to be out there, and they can't understand why those fights aren't taking place. The fight is based upon what kind of fan base a fighter has. Now, a fighter, Mayweather had an amazing fan base because of his record, because he was a skilled fighter, but mainly because of his personality. Other than that, it's largely chauvinistic, which means that Mexican fight fans are going to probably show up for the Mexican fighter. Puerto Rican fight fans stuck with Cotto probably too long, though they didn't show up for the fight at Madison Square Garden. Andre Ward does not have a specific fan base of his own. So he blew a wonderful opportunity
especially in the home crowd.
Absolutely, in his backyard. If he had come out, sure, this is a fight he's supposed to win. So in a fight that you're supposed to win, you better not just win, you better do more.
So what's the crowd? Okay, so let's move ahead. Andre Ward and Sergey Kovalev in November. What are we looking at here at the crowd? This isn't Mayweather Hatton. This isn't a bunch of people coming over from England and getting rowdy. And it's not even a great Ward a few years ago could have been the next great American fighter. And now it's, who's he again? For casual fans. Or it's, but he might have flubbed his opportunity, which I don't think he's taking seriously enough, which we saw in the interview before with Jim Lampley. So what are we looking at in the arena? Are we going to get are we going to get a bunch of boxing purists?
Well,
is it going to be like the quietest fight ever?
Probably. Even boxing purists are aware of the fact that Andre Ward chose recently to fight in the courtroom rather than in the ring, which makes you wonder how much he loves the fight game.
So what's your opinion of his cavalier attitude towards, I did what I had to do. I don't think it's a big deal that I haven't been fighting much. Like, that hurts him. I mean,
that hurts him in a big way. How is that going to make him appealing to boxing fans or to sports fans who are not necessarily boxing fans but would get excited? Remember, the sport just went through a trauma. Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather, a fight that took place 5 years too late, was the great pseudo event of recent history in sports.
Yeah.
Tremendous buildup, exactly what we're talking about. It wasn't in the sports section of the paper. It was on the front page of the paper.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was on TMZ rather than simply on sports radio.
Yeah.
It was. And
It shit the bed.
absolutely, you had to fumigate the sport after that. They should have said, "Here's your money back. We apologize." Instead, the promoters walked away with a zillion. And
The fighters blame injury.
oh yeah,
I mean, if you blame anyone in that fight, fighters,
you have to blame everybody.
you have to blame everybody. But Floyd was Floyd in that fight. He's been that same way for the last
Absolutely.
6-7 years. I don't know what people were expecting.
Right.
If anyone held back, it looked like a little bit. It was probably Manny, and then he mentions the shoulder.
Oh, come
the
on.
whole thing just collapsed. And then not to mention HBO and Showtime butting heads, and now they're in a legal dispute. And now that all that's out there publicly,
And this comes after Floyd with Victor Ortiz, after a series of exhibitions, fights that are pay-per-view fights,
Yeah.
where I'm surprised that they didn't book my sister as an opponent.
Yeah.
One glare from her might have scared poor Floyd.
Okay, so we're talking about repairing the sport.
Yes.
And how this fight didn't do anyone any favors, didn't help the sport, didn't help Kovalev and Ward.
Right.
So what are we looking at with Kovalev Ward realistically? Pay-per-view buys, how it's going to be received, and what do you think ultimately will happen? I'd love to hear your opinion. What do you think is going to happen overall with the fight?
The question is, to me, the big question to me is, first of all, what kind of shape Kovalev is when he shows up? Because his last outing was not great. It wasn't horrible. To read the pundits, it was a disaster. I don't think compared to what we saw with Ward, it was almost pretty good.
Yeah.
But he did not seem motivated and maybe they're using it as an excuse that he was fighting in his backyard. Well, Terrence Crawford likes to fight in his backyard.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
well, too bad that I don't think a lot of TV providers are going to go to Nebraska. For I don't think Pacquiao, if that fight happens, I don't think Pacquiao's going to Lincoln. But that would be great. That would be great.
But we see all these excuses. What kind of fight will it be? Will Ward engage in the fight? Because we've seen fights where people don't engage. I mean, Provodnikov was a guy who used to engage, and then we saw him in a fight where he dominated the first round and gave up.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
We saw a fight last week where Mikey Garcia's opponent could have won an Olympic diving
I
competition.
think he's on today in Rio.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's on the diving events. He's there. He's there.
Right. I hope it's a great fight because, and I say that not just for the viewership of that fight, but for the sport itself.
So are we as fans? Because I feel like there's so much rhetoric about we gotta save the sport. It's got to get back into the. Why can't we as boxing fans be comfortable with? Because you get guys like, and the key example is Michael Wilbon on PTI.
Yeah.
Always bashes boxing. It's not what it was. It's not. And in your film, El Boxeo,
Yeah.
right there, everyone. Your film says, it's a truly international sport now.
Precisely.
So in our opinion, in a lot of people, it's become international. It's not so. It's It's not just Leonard and Hagler and Hearns and Tyson and Holyfield.
Exactly.
And all these American fighters. It's truly international. So, and to some scale, it's a bigger sport internationally.
Precisely.
So why are we as boxing fans so obsessed with trying to get it back into the American rhetoric?
Because it's not prime time. Once upon a time, boxing was on primetime TV and it was on free TV. What we're seeing new audiences emerge.
Yeah.
So in the Philippines, everything stopped when Manny Pacquiao fought.
Oh yeah.
Prior to that, the Philippines were, insignificant in the world of sports.
Isn't it asking too much though in the world we live in now with 1,000 channels and then the internet, the world being so small? Isn't it asking for too much for the sport? Yeah, in the Philippines it could be the biggest thing. But isn't it asking too much for the entire country here to get behind?
Yeah, we saw it. Imagine what would have happened if the Manny Floyd fight
Was something.
had not been a dud. I mean, that was on. Baseball was considered dead, and suddenly you had Sosa and McGuire having a home run race.
That's a good point.
And people who didn't follow baseball Suddenly, we're turning in to see, did Sammy hit one? Did Mark hit one? That they were juiced, that's a whole other thing. But a sport can be revivified the minute that there's something really exciting, or in the case of boxing, there are some charismatic figures. What do we need to do? The alphabet soup doesn't help.
No. Okay, so that was one of my questions. I'll ask you now. So if you had to pick one thing, you got to pick one thing that you could change about the sport of boxing. What are you changing? If you had to pick one thing, the belts suck.
Yeah, we can go through a whole laundry list.
What would be one thing you could make the biggest impact?
Revive Olympic boxing in a really exciting way. When you consider what Olympic boxing did for a guy named Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali, what you consider what Olympic boxing did for Oscar De La Hoya, kid from East LA, when you consider what Olympic boxing did for Sugar Ray Leonard, that was a platform. Why does the NBA insist that guys go to college for 1 year? Because who was Carmelo Anthony if he's coming out of high school? He takes Syracuse to the Final Four, and he's Carmelo Anthony, household name. There's a sense of anticipation. Kevin Durant, similarly. You need a platform that introduces not just fight fans, but the world.
That's a great point.
To these people.
So why was it so much, to kind of put a bow on this part of the conversation, but why were guys like De La Hoya and Leonard and Cassius Clay, and even to the point, Holyfield, because of the horribleness that happened with that Olympics, why were they such? Was it because boxing was already such a mainstream sport? Can you get it back? Because now there's even more Olympic events. I was on my app last night. I could watch shooting, I could watch archery, I could watch swimming. I don't even think if it was back in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, people, if there was an app, I don't think people are keen in on boxing. So how can you get them back?
Well, boxing is one of the few sports. Look, the Olympics can create huge personalities. Nadja Comaneci. Come on.
Yeah.
Suddenly she was a household name and everybody was interested in her.
So it's lazy. There's a little bit of laziness in developing these stars. Who's in charge of developing stars like that?
Boxing historically has had incredible narratives. We knew everything about Oscar. We knew everything about Cassius Clay and then Ali. Imagine the fact, you've got right-wing talk show hosts talking, knocking Islam and saying that there's nobody good who ever came out of Islam. Oh, we don't mean you, Ali. We don't mean you, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, just as you got guys who were talking about closing the borders, who see their kids walk into the house wearing jerseys that say Gonzalez or Correa or Hernandez. You got some funny things. But the Olympics were always an opportunity to discover not just athletes but personalities.
They have, and I have to say they've done a good job pushing some of the female boxers. But then there's just no platform after that. They have the opposite problem. The female boxers. They get pushed really well in the amateurs, but then there's no following professionally,
which is little different than the WNBA.
Oh God.
The only sport that I can the great women's soccer players too. There's no aftermath.
Well, there's finally a changing there.
Yeah, it's happening. Soccer, but largely because of AYSO with little girls playing and whatnot. Tennis is different. The Williams sisters are draws. They're great players.
50-50 sport in my mind. Why people watch? Men and women. I think that's the only sport that's completely equal.
Absolutely.
On the planet.
Yeah.
But I mean, boxing's got a lot of work to do. And I've never heard, I hear get rid of the belt, get rid of all the promoters, get rid of all the teams.
Which is true.
But now I've never heard anyone really say, if you revamp it at the Olympic level, then you've got an interest. I was trying to watch two guys fight last night, and they didn't have a graphic up the entire time with their names. I'm like, can we just not be lazy? I'm
absolutely
interested in these two fighters. And after a full round, you got a guy wearing blue, you got a guy wearing red. I know what country they're in, but
no,
I don't know their names. I don't know their background.
You're absolutely right. But Olympic boxing changed. It turned into fencing, and you had the Cubans making everybody a lefty and everybody mechanical. And, for several years, it could be argued that Rigondeaux was the most skilled boxer in the world. And to me, watching him was like watching paint dry or worse. He refused to give the fans to acknowledge that it was entertaining, that it was entertainment, and that there was an obligation on his part to do what Derek Jeter did for baseball. How could you not? Derek Jeter was going to find you. Anytime you saw him play, he was going to do something that was going to give you your money's worth.
Yeah.
And he carried himself in an amazing way, and he was a winner.
Yeah.
But you had fights where the audience, in Singapore, in Hong Kong rather, where the audience walked out during a Rigondeaux fight.
That's bad.
And then he's wondering why he can't get a fight.
Yeah.
First of all, you're not going to, you can't make enough money fighting against him.
No.
And you can't look good fighting against him. So why do it?
No.
And then HBO spurned him.
Yep.
And he was mystified.
He's edging back into some of the headlines recently. I know he's being mentioned with some names. Again, I think he might be open to changing his style. We'll have to see.
The question is, can someone after so long?
Maybe. If the paycheck is in front of him. Hey, throw 10 more punches this round.
Well, there's a problem with the Cuban fighters. There are several problems. They all fought at a weight that much lower than they should have. They were, as we said, they were mechanical and lefty,
Yeah.
but they were also, in that regime, they were monitored 24/7. Suddenly they come over here, and there's abundance.
Yeah.
And the first stop is the jewelry store.
Yeah.
Then the next stop is the supermarket. They walk into Publix in Miami, and when they leave, a half hour later, they're 20 pounds heavier.
Yeah. There is, except for Luis Ortiz, who it's good for. There's the exception.
And who wants to fight him?
Yeah, nobody.
And he wants too much money.
Let's find a middle ground, because the heavyweights, and we'll switch gears here and we'll talk about your film. But the heavyweights, there's so much potential. It's right there. There's so many budding stars, but I fear that it's gonna collapse a bit.
Well,
back down.
The great hope that many people had for a lot of reasons was Chris Arreola.
Ugh.
But a great personality.
Yes.
Fun, wonderful interview. And the biggest fight of his life, he shows up with an excuse. Oh, if I'd been in shape, I would have kicked his butt. Yeah.
Were you there?
Yes.
I was there. That was the first time I've seen a crowd boo. Pro-Latino crowd. He starts crying in the ring.
Yeah,
if you haven't
absolutely.
watched it, look it up on YouTube. He starts crying in the ring, and immediately everyone around me just get out of the building. Just boot him out of the building.
Absolutely.
What a way to lose your base.
Mexican fight fans are incredibly knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And
They knew.
They want They want corazon.
Yeah.
And they will, as is said in my film, a Mexican fighter is willing to fight in the ring. And when they see one who isn't, boy, are they ready to turn on him.
Yeah. And we also learn, willing to turn their backs if the time comes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of that passion, because they're going to give everything.
Absolutely.
So the next thing for Ward, November 19th versus Kovalev. I'm excited. I'm sure you're excited. I'll be buying the pay-per-view. I'll be watching it. We'll be here on YouTube in the fall talking about this fight, because, any way you slice it, bad performances maybe, if you think by each fighter going into the fight, we're getting the two best light heavyweights undefeated coming in, and you don't see that very often.
And two of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world.
Yes, and completely different skill set.
Styles.
Yes.
Yeah. Languages, you name it.
Yes, and I guarantee, I don't know what this nice Kovalev's all about recently. I miss the trash talking Kovalev.
Absolutely.
The past 2 times I've seen him, he's been way too nice. So Sergey,
yeah, look, we want Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird.
It's a little too nice.
No, Larry Bird was one of the great trash talkers.
They tried, but it was, okay. I'm thinking more like Pistons, against anybody.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like, I want that Kovalev. I want the Bill Lambier Kovalev. That's just going, because that's going to generate interest.
Somebody who kicks puppies.
Yes, kicks puppies. Bit of a controversial figure with Adonis Stevenson,
right?
Who looked, decent last week, and I don't know what's going on with him, but that's a different show altogether. Like, he should be fighting much better competition.
Exactly.
But we'll move on here. Just a few notes that we were talking about earlier. If we have that news bed drop, I love that news bed drop, Mark, and the fans love it too. So if we've got the breaking news, I would love to hit that, because we're talking about. There it is. There it is. Some very strange tweets last night by Ricky Hatton, and the boxing fans are kind of left guessing here. I guess he'd been like in a series of arguments with his fiance, and he went on Twitter last night saying, "I have nothing left, absolutely nothing." We were talking about it before. You just hope that these boxers who are, in a rough situation growing up can get out of.
Well, the
he's
line,
a young guy,
the line that we were
years old.
talking about, boxers fight their way off the streets, then all too often wind up back on the street. And for the older fight fans, Montequia Annapolis, Cuban fighter who made Mexico his home and fought often in L.A., one of the greatest fighters of all time. From what I was told by the Suleiman family, he's living on the street in Mexico, which is sad. Bobby Chacon is one of the most charismatic, probably to my mind, the most charismatic fighter ever to come out of Southern California. He's basically indigent. Alex Ramos, great guy, the Bronx Bomber, has had serious problems. A wonderful guy named John Bray, who was a heavyweight, who became a trainer after his career was over. He's got problems now. We talked about the fact that there are problems of other sorts. Israel Vasquez lost an eye, had to have an eye surgically removed.
Yeah, terrible.
Because he fought after one of the great trilogies in boxing history, Marquez Vasquez. They had fight number 4, which never should have happened.
No.
And every time they have one of those fights, not only does somebody risk serious injury, like what happened to Israel, but also it turns off the fans.
No.
Great fights generate enthusiasm, and that's what you want. You want people. Once upon a time, we were talking about the Olympic Auditorium. There was every week. There was a war. The matchmaker was known as Don Warwick Chargan, one of the all-time great guys, as well as being a great matchmaker, still going.
Yeah.
I've rarely had as much fun talking boxing as I did one weekend in Vegas when I went out there for a big fight, because when I was making El Boxeo, I would go to places when there was a fight because everybody comes in.
Yeah.
And I got there Friday night and had dinner with, it was to start the fun, with Larry Merchant and Freddie Roach.
Yeah.
Then decided, okay, I'll go back to my room after a long and lengthy and late dinner with those two, when I got grabbed by the great boxing publicist Bill Kaplan, who said, come on, we're hanging out. And it was Kaplan and Chargan and a couple of other guys, Pugmire from the LA Times, and I wound up getting back to my room in time to shower and shave before I had to start doing interviews.
Perfect.
Did the interviews, had a bite of dinner, went to the fights, and sat there. And then Larry Merchant said, "Let's go. You come into the post-fight interview." I said, "Yes." So I sat with him, and I heard something I'd never expected to hear in boxing. When Victor Ortiz said something, then looked up and said, "Wait, that's an oxymoron."
Victor.
Larry elbowed me. I elbowed Larry. Went out and drank. Had a couple of bottles of wine with Larry, and was about to stagger back to my room, finally to sleep, when Kaplan and Chargan grabbed me again.
Yes, that's good. It's a fraternity. It truly is a fraternity.
It's the boxing brotherhood.
It's great. Well, we hope that Ricky Hatton's fine. That was the first point.
Please,
we hope that he's a great fighter, and hope he gets well, and this is nothing too serious. Another couple points in the news is that Andre Ward says, I think he's actually serious about fighting at heavyweight. Don't even get us started with him fighting at heavyweight. And that he's never going to go back down to 168, which I think would be better for him, but I know it was tough to make fights, but I think he's perfect at that weight class.
Absolutely.
But, so that's our news today, and we're going to get into El Boxeo here. I've got another teaser clip I want to show everyone, and then we'll talk a little bit about it.
because it used to be one place, the Olympic, where they all came to, and they fought. And from that point on, they fought, everywhere else in the world. But the Mecca was right there. You talk about the Madison Square Garden, obviously they had their time. But if you talk about the West Coast and the Latino fighters, there's no better place than the Olympic.
The Olympic was like the Madison Square Garden of the West. And we weren't letting the fighters go back there. Well, we had good drawing cards. I mean, we fought hard to keep them, and they did the same thing. Oh, at the Garden, they would send me opponents. I would send them opponents. But the cream of the crop, no, you wouldn't.
I love it. We've got about 15 minutes here, so let's spitball a little
Great.
bit about. I want to talk about the Olympics.
Sure.
Because we have and there's such a fan base in LA, but there's such a huge fan base in LA that knows nothing about the Olympics. Sorry, I have someone chiming in on the chat real quick. I gotta say hey to Brian. I gotta let him know. So what's up, Brian? I want to talk to the fans. What did you think of the fight last night? And if you've seen El Boxeo, I'd love your thoughts. So the Olympic Auditorium, I mean, that shut down in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And it came in the 40s.
Yes.
So it was like a 30-year period. And did you have a chance to go to fights at the
I
Olympic?
did. And
what did you think of that venue?
I loved it.
Yeah.
There's a sense that you get where you say, hey, I've come home.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. I'd heard about the Olympic. I grew up in New Jersey. I saw fights locally. I saw fights at Madison Square Garden, Sunnyside Arena. I couldn't wait to get to the Olympic when I came out here. And not only did it live up to my expectations, it exceeded them. There was an electricity in the air. The fans, it was a place where you went once a week. The notion of that being a destination, a place like that existing today, a destination every week.
Yeah.
Don Chargan, as I mentioned, was a great, great matchmaker. Eileen Eaton, who ran the place.
That's someone I love to talk about. And we were saying there should be
Absolutely
more information because there's obviously a story there with her.
Oh, great story. And but they if you didn't show up for 2 weeks in a row, you lost your seats.
Wow.
The demand was so great.
How big was the arena?
I don't know what the actual seating was, but it was large but felt small.
Yeah.
And you learned quickly where to sit and where not to sit. In other words, you didn't sit just underneath the balcony, because you ran the risk, if there was a bad decision, of getting drenched with we'll call it recycled beer.
Yeah.
You also, there's a story that Frankie Duarte, who fought at the Olympic many times, tells in the film. There was chauvinism there, and Frankie was considered himself Latino to the core, but he was a local guy, and he fought against a Mexican, not Mexican American fighter, and as his hand was raised with the decision, the winner, Frankie Eduardo Duarte, he was hit in the head with a bottle.
So why do we? Because you wouldn't see that. You see that in some communities here in the States. You see it within the African American community. You're not worthy of this. You're not truly black. We see that. But on a larger scale, you don't see Andre Ward getting hit with a bottle or getting hate because he's not truly American, or you're not truly but that dynamic,
right.
It shouldn't exist. But why do you think it's? Because it still exists today to a point. With Oscar, it existed.
Oh, there's no question about it.
So why so much? Why would people turn on a fighter that? Because the fans that are there are probably Mexican American.
Oh, absolutely. Most of them are.
And they turn.
But there's such a pride in their heritage, but let's give them their due. They they are really, really astute fight fans. And they are now backing Golovkin because they love his
Mexican
heart, and they love his style, and of course, Tom Loeffler is smart enough to bill him as fighting Mexican style, but they will boo a Mexican fighter if he's not giving it. But a guy like Salido, they know he's going to give his all.
Yes.
And once upon a time, records didn't matter. Today, They, HBO and Showtime.
That's how they sold brand.
Right. Well, they want, a guy 29-1.
Yeah.
He fought my sister.
Yeah.
He fought Stevie Wonder.
He fought some kid.
Oh, absolutely.
Some 13-year-old kid.
Absolutely. So the records are padded, and and we talked earlier. There was a really good fight last week, but in Santa Cruz got beat. And I think that one can make the claim that Santa Cruz, despite all the activity which he brings, which is fun to see, is a kind of was a manufactured star, in that he was matched very, very carefully. He really didn't fight anybody.
Isn't that the name of the game though now, Alan? Like more than ever, I think the fight fans are smart on the sport. We know that Andre Ward's people. We can see through it. But even the more not so transparent ones. If you see, it's Pacquiao versus Crawford. You're talking about Bob Arum. Oh, this is good for Bob because it's his next star. Right. Hasn't there always kind of been that aspect?
Well, here's the scoop.
In boxing.
Here's the scoop. Once upon a time, records didn't matter. Also, once upon a time, fighters fought often. The last serious fighter who fought often was Donaire.
And we saw what happened.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. But he was giving the fans something to look forward to often. Champions, once upon a time, used to fight non-title bouts in between fights, and I maintain that Oscar was a very, very good fighter. What kept him from being a great fighter is that Oscar's an intelligent guy with many interests, and he wound up fighting twice a year.
Yeah.
Cinco de Mayo and Hispanic Heritage Month. Yeah. Which means that even if he was going to the gym, he was going to the gym like a hitter taking batting practice.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. When you fight frequently, you have to maintain fighting weight. Also, every single fight, you learn something. You learn how to fight a southpaw. You learn how to fight a body puncher. You learn how to fight a Mexican who's coming, who starts coming forward as he leaves the dressing room.
Yeah.
You learn how to cut the ring off.
I think you see a change though. You see baseball. Pitchers used to pitch 200 innings, and then as the sport grows and there's so much more money involved, you're going to protect your investment.
Oh, absolutely.
So you can't have that anymore. But you can have more than what Ward has been giving us. You can give us more. You can give us more than one fight every year, like he has.
Well,
some fighters still do 3 or 4, rarely, but the big ones, no more than 2 or 3.
Well, they once upon a time, the amount of money was nowhere near as great.
Yeah,
they now make so much. The question also becomes: some guys get into boxing because somebody says you'd be good. They discover they are good. Do they really love the sport? Not necessarily. So it becomes a business.
Yep.
You have, but one of the big problems today is the absence of personalities. Floyd was and is a great personality. Is he a great human being? Not for me to judge, but a great personality. Yeah. I don't know Floyd. I know his Uncle Roger, who's in my film, who's a wonderful character.
Yes.
Oscar is a personality.
Yeah.
Ray Leonard is a great guy.
Mancini.
Ray Mancini is he lights up the room, and I'm proud that I'm mentioning guys who are all in my film because I got to hang out with all of them.
Course.
And I consider Ray Mancini a friend.
Yes.
They're fun, but Terrence Crawford is my favorite of the new wave of fighters. Yet I don't know much about him yet, and that's a failing on the part of Top Rank and his manager and everybody else. Also,
hopefully he'll get there.
Well,
he needs that marquee fight.
Yeah, no, and but the opportunities are missed. Sergio Martinez was a really exciting fighter. Yeah. Also, women were attracted to him because he was a real good-looking guy. Why didn't Lou DiBella give him English lessons?
Exactly.
Right? You make him bilingual, and how much more appealing is he?
We see that now with Canelo. There's a little bit of that going on as well.
Right.
It's there are definitely balls that are dropped. in creating stars.
Yeah.
Because you've got to create stars in this sport. I mean, you can't just get by with, oh, you've got one star in a football team. It's good enough. I mean, this is your one chance to create somebody.
Even in baseball, kids used to say to their dads, "I want to see Junior Griffey. Can you take me?"
Yeah.
There aren't as many. When they all had colorful nicknames, when they stayed with the same team for a while, that you need the next wave of viewers, of people to go to the games, or in this case the fights, of people to follow. People ultimately, with the entertainment dollar stretched very thin, you're going to root for somebody who either is, if you're Mexican heritage, you're likely to root for somebody from Mexico. But if you find out about the person and you really get excited, then you want to see him fight again.
Exactly.
And you want to see him fight against a real opponent. You don't. When boxing gives us a series of largely exhibitions,
yes,
we get hurt. And Al Heyman wearing two. I'd love to see it work, but he wears two hats. And there's a contradiction, it seems to me, between Al Heyman, the manager, and Al Heyman, the promoter.
Yeah. I mean, PBC right now is one of the best and worst things going because there's so much. It's literally, there is something every week, HBO, Showtime, or NBC, or Spike, or something. You can find it. And PBC has brought that, but their stable of fighters is so small, and they all just fight each other, and you feel like you're just getting the PBC division of boxing, but the exposure is great. I think it can lead to bigger things. I think we're going to get the exposure.
That's the hope. I mean, nobody would love that more than me.
No, both of us. If hopefully we can see more fights like our This Day in Boxing History fight. I want to show this real quick to the fans. This was back August 7th, 2004, Diego Corrales versus Acelino Freitas. Let's roll the tape. Did I lose Mark? I think Mark's sleeping in the booth. Yeah. Oh, there it is. There's my man. Do you remember this fight, Alan?
Yes.
This was after that Freitas had been knocked down twice already in the fight, and obviously frustrated.
Yeah.
By Diego, and this was prime Diego.
Oh, who was a really colorful fighter.
Yes. And here comes
the talented
shot.
Fighter.
Goes down with the right hand.
Yeah.
And that was probably the lesser of all the knockdowns in that fight.
But it was cumulative.
It was cumulative, and then we see what happens to Freitas here shortly after the knockdown.
Yeah.
That's it. He doesn't want any more to do with Diego. Hard to believe this was 12 years ago, right?
No,
12 years ago, right? And we lost Diego tragically, which is terrible. But this was truly right before. This was right before his war with Castillo.
Yep,
this is the fight right before, and this is for the WBO super featherweight title. So he's becoming a star because his fights against Casamayor led him to this, and then he's a stud. He trailed. This was probably the best you're going to get of Diego, but this speaks on behalf of. He's Brazilian,
right?
But there is that aspect of I'm going to come forward, and
Absolutely.
if I can't get what I want to get done, I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
What is? We've got about 5 minutes here.
Well,
and I want to pump Boxeo.
The classic case of that was Roberto Duran.
Yeah.
And in the film, I was fortunate enough to get Ray Leonard to talk about that fight.
Yeah.
And the first fight, Leonard surprised him by going toe-to-toe. Everybody assumed that Leonard was going to dance. And if you look at the fight closely, that could have gone either way. Did Duran deserve the win? Probably, but it could have gone either way. But Ray Leonard won the respect of the world.
Well, that also reminds me of the fight we just watched.
Right.
Because if you look at the judges' scorecards from that fight, it was almost dead even.
Absolutely.
And you wonder... Are these fighters so in their bubble, in their zone, that they don't realize that, hey, you might be winning this fight?
Well, you've got your cornermen telling you that.
Yeah.
So how can they not be?
They're just frustrated that they're not kicking their ass,
or that they're not being able to impose their will and their style. But in the second Duran-Leonard fight, Ray played with his head. And, was throwing bolo punches.
Yeah.
And, he swears that was spontaneous. that he saw what was going on and that he saw that Duran was frustrated, and he milked it and milked it and milked it.
Yeah.
And you saw the result. I mean,
Head games.
You know, Duran at 135 may have been the greatest fighter of the modern era.
True.
You know, just but
it's a shame it's a shame that he's known for.
that's the legacy.
That it's
You know,
yeah, it's a shame.
there certain careers have what I call defining moments.
That's one of them.
That
But he also has to own up to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also a terrible. I mean, to turn your back in such a huge fight like that is just. So I mean, it shouldn't define his career, but he should have to
sadly,
answer questions.
Yeah, no, sad. You know, you. Mark McGuire, you know, is always going to be defined by the steroids.
Yes.
You know, there are certain choices people make.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they're horrible human beings. But, you know, when you are in the spotlight, you know, your life is not the same. When I remember years ago, the basketball player Paul Pierce, who's one of the unsung heroes of the NBA. You know, the year that the Celtics beat the Lakers, he not only carried the Celtics offensively, he also shut down Kobe Bryant.
True.
But there was a point many years ago where he was stabbed, and somebody asked me what I thought, and I said, "Why is a public figure in a pool room at 3 a.m.? Can any good happen?
Build your own pool room.
Right? Can any good come from that?
Not really.
You know?
No.
And you say, you know, when you become a celebrity, when you become a star, you acquire wealth, you acquire all sorts of things, but you also give up certain freedoms.
Yeah.
And in the case of Roberto Duran, because he was such a great fighter, he will always be acknowledged, hopefully, as an extraordinary fighter. But the defining moment will always be no mas.
It's true. And he could have fought till he was 60 if he didn't get in that car wreck. That's for sure. I think he could have. I mean, he might have gone to Publix a little too much later on in his career. No offense, Roberto. He's not watching. But if he is, we love you here. We also love El Boxeo.
Thank
Alan.
you.
I really want to thank you for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure.
Everyone can watch El Boxeo. If you've got Amazon Prime, which you should because, I mean, it's worth it, check it out. That's where I watched it. And also you can buy it on DVD. Those are the two platforms
Yes.
it's on, right? So Amazon Prime and on DVD.
Or elboxeothemovie.com.
Oh, yes. Check it out. And check it out. There's more teasers on YouTube as well.
Or if on the website or on imdb.com, you can see the trailer.
Yes.
Which is longer.
Yes. Yes. You got to talk to everybody and their brother in the sport.
For me, it was heaven.
Phenomenal. It was great hearing all the different angles and people I haven't heard from in the fight game in a long time. And Jose Suleiman. So you got, I mean, the last interview.
Well, a little anecdote. Jose Suleiman used to say that God played a trick on the world when he, Don King, and Bob Arum were all born in the same year. What he failed to state is that Larry Merchant was also born that year.
Oh, was he?
Absolutely.
That was a great year. 1931, right? 1930, I think so.
56.
Yeah, 56. We'll just say 56. We'll say it for them. But Alan, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, pleasure's all mine.
And where can everyone find you on social media?
On Facebook.
Yeah.
At elboxeo.themovie.com. At Al Swyer on Twitter.
SWYER.
Or, walking my dog in Santa Monica.
Yeah, shout out. Just say, hey, I loved you on the Afterbuzz boxing show, Alan. And
as a matter of fact, speaking of anecdotes, Larry Merchant and I live a block away from each other.
That's great. Oh my God, we got to have you back on to just talk.
I'd love to.
I just would love to talk about your past, and then and you fought as well. So I'd love to dive into that. So anytime there's another fight,
I'd love to do. I'm about to make a movie in France.
Yes.
Which is heaven on earth for me because I lived there, went to school there for a while, worked there. So I'm getting to do a largely autobiographical scripted film, and I've done 9 documentaries in a row. So it's nice to go back to working with actors and a script. But I will be back in mid-October. We've got a big fight coming up in November. We've got a couple of good fights coming up, so I'd love to do it.
All right, so when that project gets a little closer, come back in. We'll talk about it, and then we'll talk about the fight game.
And if anybody happens to be in the south of France in
If you just happen to be there.
in mid-September, you're welcome to have get a hold of me. You're welcome to have your Hitchcock moment.
Perfect. All right, you heard it. If you're in the south of France in the next couple of months,
Rumor
hit up
has
Alan.
it there are things to eat and drink there.
That's true. I have heard that. Alan, pleasure.
Oh, pleasure was all
Thank
mine.
you. I'm at Gilkerson Radio on Twitter. That's Jared Gilkerson. Brian Rice in the chat room. We want to talk to you. I saw that you were chiming in earlier. Sorry I missed your text about the fight, but we want you to talk. Get at me on Twitter. Let me know what you're thinking. And occasionally I do polls on Twitter. I just did a Pacquiao versus Crawford poll, and it was the numbers were kind of staggering. Huge numbers for Pacquiao over Crawford. But hey, hopefully we'll do a preview show.
Anybody want to place any bets?
Yeah, really. I'm in. I want to see the odds on that. But Alan, once again, a pleasure. El Boxeo, Amazon Prime, and on DVD, elboxeo.net.
elboxeothemovie.com.
elboxeothemovie.com. Thank you, Alan. Everyone have a great day, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Afterbuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the Afterbuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterbuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of Afterbuzz TV.
Box you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.